Hey YouTube, what's good with y'all on the nets, on the ether webs? Oh, so we got some. It says Instagram's mom to America's most horrifying mother. That's crazy. In 2026, to get that statement, you gotta be a heinous individual. Most are relaxed. Sheesh.
Conscious? She conscious? Ma'am, what's your name? Huh? I can't hear you.
They got her pinned down on the concrete. Sheesh. They still being gentle with her.
Tiffany? All right, Tiffany, I'm going to change these handcuffs out, okay? And then I'm going to roll you over and I'm going to sit you up, all right?
It was November 2023, and police were responding to a call made by a concerned neighbor. Officers were clearly confused about what they were walking into, but then again, everybody was. But with the distressed mother lying on the driveway and rumors that her two children were still inside the house and in danger, the situation quickly turned serious. However, while this chaos was unfolding outside, it tragically was already too late for them. And when police officers stepped inside Tiffany's home, that was when the story began to unravel. A story that you will soon come to realize is filled with lies, delusions, and deeply troubling clues. Hi there folks, my name is Adrian, and today we're traveling to Kentucky to look at a story that left a town in disbelief. You know,
Kentucky. I think I've been in Kentucky before. Yeah, I have been in Kentucky. Ain't much out there. I'm not gonna lie to you. And the fried chicken wasn't even that good. They got Zaxby's though, and Cookout.
Say, this story really will leave you wondering what happens behind closed doors, not only for the family and all of the social media left behind, but also all of those red flags which were kind of seen but never fully realized. Now I have to say, we've got quite a lot to cover in this one, which is slightly different to the usual. And so, on that note, please grab yourself a coffee, get comfortable, and let's caffeinate while we investigate. This is the case of Tiffany Lucas. Welcome to the Bluegrass State, folks, also known as Kentucky, or the horse capital of the world. It is home to the world's longest cave system, hosts the oldest continuously held horse race, and produces more than 95% of the world's entire supply of bourbon.
Man, I'm trying to go see a horse race, sip some whiskey. That's lit. But like, what? Some nice bourbon.
Which, considering how big the world actually is extraordinarily impressive. However, Kentucky has a darker side too, because not only does poverty run deep here, but it's actually too deep to ignore, because with that comes a whole list of other issues.
But America really like its own. They got like 50 little countries, or like 30 little countries in the one country. Because I'm over here on the East Coast and I don't know nothing about that. Whatever going on over there.
We're talking about the brain drain, political division, and something that we'll touch later on in this video, the opioid crisis. Unfortunately, poor health is one of Kentucky's hardest truths to swallow. The state regularly ranks near the bottom in the country for overall health outcomes, which, as you will soon realize, feels especially relevant for the story that we're about to talk about. Because in many ways, this case is yet another casualty of those ongoing struggles, and it raises one simple question. When was the last time that you took your own health seriously? And I don't mean the kind of serious where you're up late at night doom scrolling and trying to convince yourself that you're fine or not, because trust me, we've all been there, including me, but I mean seriously. In fact, it was only a few weeks ago, and while experiencing RSI, which by the way just means sore wrists, that Google even suggested that I might be experiencing a heart attack. Which, yeah, I somehow doubt. And with this story touching on both...
Hey, yo, that's crazy. You go from sore wrist to a heart attack is like insane. That's like thinking you rolled your ankle to the doctor say like you tore your ACL. Like, what do you mean?
And mental health quite heavily, I think now is the perfect time to let you know about this video sponsor, ZocDoc. The beauty of ZocDoc is that it makes looking after your health that much easier. It's a free website that helps you find and book high-quality and network doctors so you can
Let him
find
get
one that
his
fits
paper,
you. And with
man.
more than 150,000 providers across all 50 states, ZocDoc certainly has you covered. Whether you're looking for dentistry, eye care, primary care, dermatology, or one of the other 200 plus specialties offered, you can easily search by specialty or symptom to find the care that's right for you. Not only that, but they give you the flexibility and freedom too. Whether you want to see someone in person or via video, that is totally up to you. And their review and verification system lets you get a real sense of who your doctor is. Oh, and did I mention that when you're ready, you don't even need to phone them. You can just book instantly. Appointments through ZocDoc happen fast too, typically within only 24 to 72 hours of booking. In fact, you can even score same-day appointments. And so, be kind to yourself this year and look after your health. Go to ZocDoc.com/coffeehousecrime to book an appointment with a top-rated in-network doctor today. Thank you so much to ZocDoc for sponsoring this video, especially with how much health pivots on this story. And now, let's get straight back to our case today. Our case today begins on November the 8th, 2023, in a small city named Shepherdsville, when a horrifying call was made to the emergency services. It was on this morning that a woman had phoned the police and said that her neighbor had come to her door and then suddenly collapsed. And as you can tell in this recording, you can actually hear how frantic things were.
No, they in the country. Sheesh.
111, where's your emergency?
219 Bentwood Drive, Shepherdsville, Kentucky, 40165.
Shepherdsville.
My neighbor just came up to my door and just passed out, and I can't get her to wake up. She's
Okay, is she breathing?
She is.
How old is she?
I would say in her early 30s. And now she's screaming that her kids are dying. I don't know. I don't even know her name.
The woman named...
Hey, bro, she crazy. Wow. The neighbor that you don't know. Wow, we living in crazy times because you should know your neighbors' names. But the neighbor that you don't know just coming to you to your first interaction of meeting them. They screaming and they pass it out, talk about something. They're dying. Their family is in trouble. Man, that's like a head buster right there. Because, man...
Tiffany Lucas was a 32-year-old mother who lived next door and was now lying on her neighbor's driveway, drifting in and out of consciousness. Her neighbors had no idea what had happened inside her home, only that this looked like a medical emergency and that Tiffany might be in serious trouble. While one of the neighbors stayed by her side, another neighbor walked towards the Lucas household, heading straight towards what could be possible danger. The man knew that Tiffany had 2 children inside, and so, whatever was going on, they could possibly be in harm's way too. But tragically, little did they know that it was already too late. Within minutes, police officers arrived at Bentwood Drive. They rushed into the driveway and then kneeled beside Tiffany. But moments later, then realized that the real emergency wasn't outside. It was actually inside with her children. Following the neighbor's husband, deputies then moved carefully through the Lucas household, calling out as they cleared each room. As they walked through, everything seemed quiet and maybe even calm. That was until they reached one of the bedrooms. On the bed and lying side by side were Tiffany's 2 sons, that being 9-year-old Jaden Howard and 6-year-old Morris Baker Jr., also known as Peanut. What happened next is too disturbing to show on YouTube, but in short, although both boys were still alive, they were only barely clinging to life. And that is because it appeared that they had been shot 4 times in—
What? Huh?
Police officers shouted for the paramedics, who rushed in to then desperately try to save both of the boys, and within minutes, both of them were on their way to a local hospital. Once they were gone, detectives then focused their efforts on trying to understand what precisely happened in this bedroom, and soon enough, they concluded that this must have been an act of double homicide. But outside of that bedroom, something, or rather the lack of something, really stood out. They suddenly realized that there were actually no signs of an intruder, and there was no evidence to suggest that anybody—
Bruh. That's crazy. She's horrific. I never seen this video, but just off the fact that like, what mother was knowing what just happened, what this guy said happened to her kids, is just gonna be lying there on the ground. If they can still move, if they're able bodied to move, is not being frantic and panicking. That is ridiculous already right there. That would be like, they would just lock her up off that alone. If we're gonna be honest, like.
Outside of the family had even entered the property that morning. The windows were fine, the doors hadn't been tampered with, and the locks were still intact. So, what was going on? What this meant, or at least suggested, is that none of this had actually come from outside of the family home. And of course, that left only one person remaining: the boy's mother, who was now lying outside on the driveway. It's kind of a very grim and uncomfortable realization, isn't it? And on that note, this story suddenly became a whole lot darker. The neighborhood was stunned as ambulances tore down the street towards Louisville and officers wrapped the home in police tape. You could see the confusion on neighbors' faces. What precisely had gone wrong inside that house? Who was hurt? And why was Tiffany lying there in handcuffs?
How you doing, man?
So, focusing back on Tiffany for a moment,
how's life now?
described her as dazed and disoriented, but not seriously injured, which, given the
you got out just in time for
actually
GTA
made
6.
them more uneasy.
Hey, Brody said he just got out. That's right in time for GTA 6, man. You were lucky. You go cop that PS5.
Paramedics checked her over and found only a small cut near her ear, something that she later described as a graze from an attempted self-inflicted gunshot. But the thing is, it barely even looked like a wound at all, because not only was there no major bleeding, but there was no real trauma either. The neighbor who had entered the house before police arrived had one blunt theory to all of this confusion, the same one that most of us are already thinking, that, tragically, Tiffany had shot her own children. And the thing is, at this point in the investigation, it seems like officers were coming to the very same conclusion. And so, right there on the driveway, she was placed in handcuffs and arrested on the spot. From the outside,
Yeah, that's crazy. Because that is insane. How on earth you just lying on your neighbor's driveway and that's crazy.
things now looked even worse than before. All the neighbors could see was a mother rambling incoherently in handcuffs, surrounded by more than a dozen police cars and ambulances who were now swarming her home, and two children who were now missing. And tragically, by that afternoon, that disbelief turned into something far heavier, because despite doctors' best efforts, both Jaden and Morris would die from their injuries. By the evening, they were both pronounced dead at the children's hospital. Almost immediately, the charges against Tiffany Lucas were now upgraded from attempted murder to 2 counts of homicide. Whatever had happened inside that family home, the consequences were now irreversible, and of course, at the center of it all was their mother.
This wench. Oh, Lord. Wow. That's crazy. She imagine being so insufferable to take your kids away. You couldn't give them to the dad. Like, that's some real demonic stuff right there. That's spiteful. Like, that's evil, man. That's some real evil stuff. You evil. That's evil shit.
So, with that said, who precisely is Tiffany Lucas?
Evil
Well,
wench.
Tiffany may have looked like a fairly ordinary single mother who was doing her best, but let me be not the first to say that she wasn't. Her Facebook page, which is filled with selfies and school photos, show exactly what you'd expect from a proud mum who also maybe has too much confidence. We'll get to that in just a second. In fact, only 6 months before the deaths of her sons, and on Mother's Day, she wrote that they were always together and never apart, and called them, quote, 3 souls and 1 heart, adding that she wouldn't know how to smile or survive without them. There were plenty of photos of them hugging, wearing matching outfits, and all the rest. I mean, there are quite literally hundreds of photos here. And the thing is that if you only knew her through social media, you would probably think that she is a tired but loving mum. However, it is also obvious that she was
Man, that's why that celebrity shit, you don't pay them people no mind, for real. Don't follow them people, what they say. Even influencers, YouTubers. Shit, even myself. Because you never know how these people really live behind the scenes. You got people like, I don't want to say their names, but high upper echelon people that do rituals and stuff behind the scenes. You know? And you never know. One week they're on the CNN, you see them on the awards show, and the next week, who knows? They're tossing some blood around in the cup, and who knows? Yeah.
Trying to promote herself left, right, and center. If you go back far enough in her social media, you can actually see that she was trying to get into fitness and modeling, and there are plenty of pictures of her in semi-professional photo shoots at best. Tiffany would also share sneak peeks as if it actually meant something, because seriously, who cares? And she would also call herself a bad little vibe. She would even try to
Oh, that's wicked. Oh shit. Shawty got 2 kids, talk about bad little vibe is crazy. You need to be an upstanding citizen, lady. That's so crazy. Whoa.
her very own runway show, which ultimately would flop. Many of her photos showed her in sports gear and outfits, in front of seemingly expensive cars, and wearing designer handbags. I really like this one, by the way, where she's sticking her butt out so hard that she's essentially Donald Duck, and her handbag is just kind of slapped leaning against her. A lot of her posts were self-indulgent too. For example, there is this one where she wrote, "Leveled up and only look back in pictures. Simply the best."
She not ugly. After what she did, yeah, she is pretty wicked ugly. I ain't gonna hold you.
Better than the rest. Except that she spelt leveled incorrectly, and even managed to get Tina Turner's lyrics wrong too. I'd like to remind you that while all of this was going on, she was also posting pictures of being the perfect mother. Which, I don't know, it just kind of feels a little bit immature, especially while you're raising children. And the truth is that the deeper that you look, the more that her image starts to feel more like a performance than anything else. Kind of like she was trying to compensate for something. And that's true, because behind the scenes, Tiffany's life had been unraveling for years. So, let's rewind for a moment and go right back to the beginning. The truth is that, although we do know that Tiffany grew up in Kentucky, there is not much information known about her childhood. What we do know, however, is that she had Jaden on March the 13th, 2014, with a man named Jurel Howard. Morris followed a few years later in 2016 with a different father, and although Tiffany would never stay with either of these two men, we do know that both boys remained close to their extended families. And then, only 3 years after Morris was born, tragedy struck in 2019 when Jaden's father, Durrell, was shot and killed in Louisville. Now, strangely, that case was never solved, but there is no evidence to suggest that Tiffany was actually linked to his murder. I have seen a few news reports try to clickbait and pivot on that and say that maybe she was.
Man, she could have gave him up to adoption. If she didn't want him, she could have gave him up to adoption. And I know one of the dads was probably still alive, hopefully. And she could have, yeah, gave him up over there. But what she did was egregious. It's like what? I mean, you making permanent solutions to short-term problems. And then, like, on top of that all, like, we in the big age of the new age, man. If you ain't want to have them babies, you could have avoided that very easily.
But honestly, I can't see it. All of a sudden, Tiffany was left to raise Jaden and Morris all alone and without much support. And honestly, from that point onwards, life really did seem to steadily go downhill. In the year 2016, and at only 25 years old, Tiffany opened a small convenience store in West Louisville called Miss Tiff's One Stop Shop. In fact, she even appeared in a local news segment to talk about it, and there's footage of that here.
A lot of people don't make their way down here, but if there's a Walmart, you know, you come out of the woodworks for Walmart. So probably would have brought a lot of people to, stop and check us out.
It is kind of strange to watch that footage now, because that business wouldn't last. And we should probably talk about her former low-level arrests too. It was in the late 2010s that Tiffany was arrested for drug possession, receiving stolen property, and other minor offenses. At one point, she even allegedly served a month in jail on a drug conviction. Nothing.
So she a little street cat. That's crazy. It still don't account for what you did. Like, wow.
Would have been enough to mark her as dangerous, but certainly enough to show that she was in fact struggling. After that jail time, she mostly fell off the radar, at least publicly. But privately, things were still deteriorating, and by 2023, Tiffany was both unemployed and using drugs again, and it turns out that her home on Bentwood Drive reflected that. Relatives described the house as filthy and barely functional. Utilities had a—
Bro, how cheap are houses down south, bro? How cheap are houses down south, man? Cause where I'm from, some shit like that running you $500K minimum. Minimum. $500K minimum. And ain't shit gonna be around you either. Damn, I'm trying not to cuss.
allegedly been shut off for non-payment, and trash had now piled up. Apparently, family had even seen eviction notices sat on the countertop. By now, Tiffany and the boys were essentially living in survival mode. However, online, she would still paint the perfect picture.
Bro, how you got eviction notices and you posting on Instagram? That's crazy. For who? For what? You got eviction notices and you posted on Instagram, acting like everything okay. Girl, you need to get up off Instagram. That's what you should have did. Instagram a drug to some of these people. It's like the never-ending pill. You know what I'm saying? They just got people scroll. Shit, I have my little junk food times, you feel me? But my junk food times, it'd be like the medium size, you feel me? The videos and shit, long form concepts and shit. Things that I could sit and actually ponder about or like play in the background. But like to scroll 12 hours and then post while you have eviction notices like just piling up. Like Tetris is just crazy.
Now, any of my regular viewers will know that we've been here time and time again, but those glitzy and curated images seen on social media versus the actual gritty reality behind closed doors could not be any further from the truth. And so, this is a reminder to all of you today, but please never compare yourself to anyone online, because the truth is, it is rarely the full story. Anyway, as it turns out, Child Protective Services had even been called to the property numerous times in the previous months and years, not only by concerned relatives, but by worried neighbors too. In fact, at one point, Morris's aunt even gained temporary custody over both boys when the authorities believed that Tiffany was making the home unsafe due to her drug abuse. And looking back, they were right on the money. Now, eventually, both boys were returned to their mother, but rather than lean on her family for help and support, Tiffany grew in—
The courts just be giving, bro, they just be giving women like the cloak of invisibility. She struck out on drugs, got arrested, was dealing drugs, like got eviction notices piling up, but the family member that probably don't got none of that going on, no, we gonna take the kids and give them back to the mom, cause she the mom. Hey, they should be able to sue. Like, they're not gonna win in this country, but hey.
increasingly isolated. Both friends and relatives described her pulling away, becoming ever increasingly paranoid, and talking about very strange things. Strange things like people were stalking her, that both Facebook and YouTube were controlling her children's minds, and even that the Wi-Fi was somehow manipulating her thoughts. Now, of course,
But you're their parent. You're their parent. Imagine complaining about Facebook or YouTube controlling your children's minds when you literally like have the master control on what they watch, what they consume. If you really wanted to, you could go get Stuart little tape sets and have them watch that if you cared so much about Facebook and YouTube. But you don't care about Facebook and YouTube. You want an escape outlet, a crutch of some sort. Or okay.
the outside, none of this was actually visible to anyone. However, behind closed doors, things were quite evidently slipping. By 2023, things were well and truly collapsing for Tiffany. With her business now closed and no stable job ever since, she was essentially financially broken. And although she was receiving some benefits from the state,
You're just stacking debt. Like what? Oh Lord. I mean, you could bounce back from a bad business, but a bad business, you got 2 kids in tow. No help is just rough. I don't know.
and support from one of her children's fathers, she was still deep in the red. And so, couple that with her deteriorating mental health and a returning addiction to a range of different drugs, well, you certainly have a recipe for disaster. To be more specific here,
Well, she look like she on drugs. Her eyes look gone, bruh.
Tiffany had
Like, this not
addicted to
even weed. This is
opioids,
pills and
although
shit.
she would abruptly quit
Eyes just look numb, man.
even that was not a good idea, because it turns out that sudden withdrawal to opioids can trigger extreme anxiety.
I knew it was pills, man. I ain't watched this video either, man. I'm telling you, bro. Her eyes just look gone, bro. Especially, like, I don't know, like, when girls on pills, it hit harder for them. I don't know what to explain. It's like, I don't know, because they smaller or something.
Insomnia, and in severe cases, psychotic symptoms. It was actually around this time that Tiffany had grown paranoid again, believing that Wi-Fi and video games were actually controlling her children. She believed that their minds were now being altered and that something unseen was influencing the household. And by the way, this wasn't just too much Fortnite or too much YouTube, but it sounded like genuine fear.
Bruh. Imagine she watching the kids play Fortnite, crack the potion, and she thinking it's a poltergeist. She thinking it's an exorcism needing to come. Man, gnarly stuff going on. What drugs was she taking? Man.
Personally, I think that is what makes this part of the story so unsettling, because while all of this was going on, life on the outside just carried on as usual. Again, I would like to reiterate here that this wasn't some sort of huge moment of alarm for Jaden and Morris, but instead a mild and lingering worry, until one day, they were gone. On the day before the murders, that being November the 7th, 2023, Tiffany took Jaden and Morris out to a Waffle House where surveillance footage shows the three of them sitting in a booth like any other family. The boys can be seen eating while Tiffany scrolls through her phone like she has so many times before. Nothing looks strange, and if you didn't know the ending to this story,
See that? Oh my gosh, the brain rot she must got. The studies they gonna pull out on our brains. Like in the next 100 years, the studies they gonna pull out on our brains. They talk about CTE, but what about Instagram brain or like Twitter brain? What do y'all think those numbers gonna be? I think it's gonna be that might be worse than CTE. Like a geezer that just played football. You feel me? Like, a geezer that just played football and wasn't attached to his phone like that. Like a Joe Montana or something. Not like a linebacker or nothing. They're cooked. They're cooked when it comes to the CTE. Or like like a Joe Montana. Or like I want to say, what other old-ass quarterback they got? Donovan McNabb, I don't know. I want to say Tom Brady, but he be on Instagram and shit. Real old quarterback. Dante Culpepper. Oh, cause they used to play for the Redskins, the one that won the Super Bowl, the old black quarterback. I know he ain't on Instagram. All right. If you was to take his brain, I say quarterback because the quarterbacks rarely get hit like that, right? If you was to take his brain and compare it to like the brains of today of like the mass majority of people, I think his would fare way better. Like at the same age rate, like whenever, yeah, you know what I'm saying. But like, yeah, that's crazy. I mean, interesting to say the least. It's just a theory of mine. I don't know. I might just be bullshitting, and you Google that shit, and it tells you that what I said, there's no correlation, no negative things will happen, and yeah, whatever. I don't believe that though, but okay.
Never look twice at that video, but of course, unfortunately, we all know what happened next. Although the following day was a school day, both Morris and Jaden never made it onto the bus. We don't know whether Tiffany intentionally kept them home or if they simply missed it, but what we do know is that hours later, they were dead. At approximately 11 AM, a neighbor's Ring doorbell camera recorded 4 gunshots over the course of roughly 30 seconds. And after the final shot, there was a gap of several minutes before Tiffany herself appeared outside screaming for help. It is reported that during that moment of quietness, she then allegedly tried to take her own life.
I bet she did. Sadly, she failed. Sadly. And then, that's wild. Like, this is her last moments of freedom. And you decided to go tweak out in front of your neighbors that you'd never even met before. Like,
That is when the gun jammed. Whether that's true or not, we may never actually know. However, it would explain the small graze along the back of her ear and why the weapon was found on her bed. With Jaden and Morris pronounced dead and Tiffany now in custody, officers were of course desperate to understand what happened and why. And so it is no surprise that later that same day, Tiffany was then brought into the sheriff's office for questioning. As you can see, she was still wearing the same clothes from that morning, and to be honest with you, still looked just as disheveled as when she had originally.
demon. Look at her eyes, bruh. Gone, man. Look at Cuz. Hey, bruh. Hey, this nigga scared. I'm crying. Look at bro. The eyes never lie, man. Look at this shit. Look at the way he looking at her, bro. He's petrified. He like, what is wrong with this wench?
Picked up. It is worth highlighting here that Detective Richard Beale.
I'm crying, dog. I'm crying, bro. You're like, bro, what is this, a zombie? Is this a zombie? Is this Medusa? Like, look at her. Bruh.
In on the interrogation, had already walked through that bedroom.
Yo.
He had already seen the bed, the blood, and the bullets.
Look at her
and
eyes,
now
bruh.
he had to sit face to face with their
Bro, she's crazy. Yo. That's a demon.
killer and ask her to explain what happened.
That's a
And let's
demon. Nah, that's a demon. Don't look at me, bro. If I'm that officer, I would have told her, bro, don't look at me, bro. Put your head down, bro. You gotta look at the floor, bro. You gotta look at the floor, bro.
say that the entire thing was bizarre.
You gotta look down at the
best.
floor. Fuck that. What?
The game systems and everything, to manipulate my children, manipulating my mind.
Who is?
What?
All them game systems and, just everything.
The game?
Yeah, like PlayStation, all the games the kids.
Hey, bro, he too old for this shit, man. Oh my god, he too old for this shit. This dude couldn't take it. I'm crying.
Yeah.
It manipulates their minds and then it gets your mind.
Stuff that's on the internet that you have access to now is
It's
t-
big.
terrible.
It's terrible for the kids and they need to stop. Like, my kids.
So you delete your old kids because you don't like the fact that they doing Fortnite dances? What is this world, man? The world don't make sense sometimes.
Beautiful angels,
Yeah.
and
Were they misbehaving earlier?
No.
No.
She's is hooked up on something. Like, this gotta be like a perk 30 or something. This is crazy. Like, she looks strung out.
They're perfect.
They are? Do you know what happened to them today? Can you
Look, oh my God.
I just did.
Hmm?
I just did.
As you can tell, Tiffany was obsessed with talking about technology which she believed manipulated her and her children. She kept ranting about mobile phones, video games, YouTube, and the internet, and spoke as if they were actively controlling her household and slowly breaking her family apart. And honestly, it didn't really sound like technology at all. It sounded
I feel bad for the dudes that put a kid in this joint. That's it. That's gnarly. Whoa. No signs, man. No signs at all. You ain't think something was going on up there? A screw was looser, missing or two. Maybe a whole department.
like something else. Being the only sane person between the two, Detective Beale eventually guided the conversation back to the obvious question. Of course, that being, if you love your children, then how did they end up shot? And that is when she brought up a name that no one in the room had ever heard before, that being Parker Borders. And what followed next sounded less like a confession and more like a conspiracy theory.
Can you just send me the mental, please?
Hmm?
Can you just take me to the mental?
We'll help you out.
Oh, so being white in America. Lord. Being white in America, you can just say some things and think some things that the regular person just can't think. The minority. Like myself. you got a double homicide. You talk about just send me to the mental hospital. Lord, you're going to jail, ma'am.
You didn't do it. Who did it?
What are you talking
I don't
about?
have nothing else to say.
Right.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
No, that's not a shot at any white people, because the regular white person, none of this will ever happen. The regular white person, they raise their kids up to be upstanding citizens. Let's be totally honest. She is a harlot, though. So, yeah.
So, to recap here, Tiffany now claimed that a man named Parker Borders had been manipulating her mind for years, and that included not only planting strange ideas in her mind.
To be fair, the regular every race raised their kids to be upstanding citizens. It's always the disheveled, crazy people that get highlighted. We don't talk about the good things in society enough when you really think about it. Yeah, it's actually kind of sad. But this do need to be highlighted because this is a crazy story. Crazy story.
But even controlling her phone. But when detectives asked where Parker was, or what he did, or even where he lived, well, Tiffany, she could not answer any of those questions. Instead, all she said is that apparently he lived close enough to remotely manipulate her. She could never provide any real or verifiable information either, only the sorts of things that would, in essence, help her defense. For example, she claimed that the gun apparently belonged to Parker. And as the interview went on, you really could tell that Tiffany was slowly cracking under the surface. In fact, she would even go on to ask for help and a psychiatric evaluation. And by the end of it, investigators really did have enough. In fact, they were quite sure that there was no accomplice, no intruder, and no Parker Borders. This was just a woman who refused to take accountability, and in return,
I don't even know how they was eating that stuff up to even begin with. If that was real, that would have been the first thing she said when y'all got there. You think she gonna sit there and play coy with you and talk about her iRobot and shit? Like, come on, bruh.
created an imaginary figure. The whole Parker Borders scenario was absolutely surreal. But, of course, detectives would still have to take it seriously. I mean, if there was even a 1% chance that a man who was capable of murdering a child was still out—
Bro, if that was a man, bro, they're not even playing with that theory for that long. You're going to jail. Like, what do we... You got her in there sleeping all cuddly. Google got about your... Wake up.
then it was worth checking. They ran the name through databases, searched local records, looked for prior contacts, and even searched through addresses. Anything that might connect a so-called Parker Borders to Tiffany Lucas. Yet, even still, despite their best efforts, they found nothing. And that's because Parker Borders simply did not exist whatsoever. And once that became overwhelmingly clear to police officers, Tiffany's story started to look less like a lead and more like a delusion, because even without her statement, the evidence already told a rather straightforward story. So, what precisely did that look like anyway? To begin with, there were no signs of forced entry, no unknown fingerprints, and no indication that anyone else had ever stepped foot inside that bedroom before the children were shot. And what was left behind at the property suggested that the house was not the scene of an invasion or a struggle either. It was quiet, contained, and essentially undisturbed, except of course for the bed where both boys were found clinging for their lives. And when confronted with all of this, Tiffany suddenly pivoted. Now, it apparently was all some sort of accident. I would like to remind you here that investigators found 4 spent bullet casings throughout that bedroom, and both Jaden and Morris had been fatally shot. That does not sound like an accident to me. The Ring doorbell camera also recorded those 4 gunshots over a period of roughly 30 seconds. That was not in quick succession, meaning that the shooter had plenty of time to figure out and think about what they were doing. To emphasize here, the more that I looked into this case, the more I realized that Tiffany is the kind of person who will never take accountability. She will never look at her actions or flaws and think, yeah, I need to correct them. Because
she won't take accountability. She in there talking about iRobot. Social media is controlling her brain and whatnot. I mean, like, social media imprints a lot of people in this world and controls parts of the things they do. But thankfully, at the end of the day, we all as humans have free will. Because you consciously choose whether you're going to go on social media. You consciously choose whether you're going to do what you saw on social media in real life. So, hey.
all of us are broken in some ways, right? And none of us are perfect. But the difference between a good person and a bad person is the ability to reflect and improve. And here Tiffany was making imaginary figures to take the blame for her own drug-fueled actions. Moving into the legal proceedings of this case, once the interrogation ended and the evidence had been processed, everything else seemed to move quite quickly. And that is because there was not much mystery left about what happened inside the house. The only real question now was for the courts to determine how Tiffany would be held responsible and whether her mental state would change the outcome. As you already know, she was formally charged with 2 counts of murder, 1 for each of her sons. And not only that, but her bond was also set at $2 million, meaning that there was no realistic chance that she would be released in the interim. Even early on in the investigation, her defense team made it clear that they intended to focus on her mental health. They never disputed whether she shot both boys, because obviously that would have been a complete waste of effort. In parallel, they signaled that they might pursue an insanity defense instead, arguing that she had been suffering from a severe mental health break which was brought on.
No, she better not get insanity. There's no way. Y'all gotta make her, no.
Drug use, withdrawal, and paranoia. Notice the nuance there, by the way. Drug use, not abuse. They also claimed that she was not fully grounded in reality at the time of the shootings, and that her thinking was distorted enough to qualify as a mental disease or defect under the law. However, an insanity defense is, of course, a gamble. It requires multiple evaluations, expert testimony, and a huge amount of persuasion. And given the physical evidence, her behavior after the shooting, and the fact that she immediately tried to shift blame, it was never a strong case to begin with. And then, all of a sudden, about a year after the murders, the case would take an unexpected turn when, instead of going to trial, Tiffany would plead guilty. Of course, this was a shock to many others, especially for someone who had initially invented imaginary culprits. Oh, and when asked directly whether she was pleading guilty because she was in fact guilty, she answered yes, and observers described her as both emotionless and cold as she said it. Tiffany's plea was open, meaning that not only was there no negotiated deal, but the sentence would be in—
Thought she had emotions. Oh, Lord. Thought she had emotions. That's crazy. I don't know where them things went along the way for her, but they was not there in the interrogation room. They was not there when the police showed up, and they probably wasn't there before. I noticed, I ain't see her shed a tear. I just noticed that. This whole video, I ain't see her wail or cry about nothing.
Really up to the judge, and that she was effectively placing her entire fate in the court's hands. During the sentencing hearing, relatives of both Jaden and Morris filled the courtroom and delivered some of the most harrowing victim impact statements.
How women regularly act when they lose a loved one. She was not acting like that at all. On no dash cam and no interrogation room. Man, they gotta throw the book at her, give her cause that's crazy.
Ever heard. Filled with both anger and grief, it was clear that neither of the families were willing to show any mercy towards her, and honestly, it's hard to blame them.
Every second of the day I hurt. And I hope they give you 2 life sentences.
Man, give her 10, man. And man.
Without the possibility of parole.
They loved you so much, but at the end of the day, you became what children their age fear the most, a monster.
To both of those families, they concluded that Tiffany had been selfish long before the murders of her 2 young boys. She was selfish in her addiction, selfish in the years of neglect, and selfish for consistently placing herself before her children's most basic needs. They believed that her addiction and her choices had put both boys directly in harm's way, and that if she had simply put both of them first, then she would have accepted their offers in looking after them while she got herself clean. Meanwhile, her attorneys reiterated that she'd been experiencing powerful delusions and a psychotic episode during the murders, again referencing the idea that she had then tried to take her own life afterwards. And although the judge did not ignore that argument, he would also not soften his language or his stance on her. Instead, he spoke about what it really means to be a parent, not merely providing just food and shelter, but safety and protection too. In the end, the judge imposed the maximum sentence available, that being life in prison on both counts. And so now, Tiffany is basically as good as dead on the outside. I do have to say here that technically, Kentucky law allows parole eligibility after 25 years. However, the prosecution were quite blunt about the odds, because in a case like this, with a mother killing her own children, the chances are practically almost non-existent.
Exactly, you're a demon.
And so, as she was led out of the room in handcuffs, the legal process—
we'll skirt off on this. Shout out, what's his name? Go show him some love. Coffee House Crime. But like, on a more serious note, bruh. For a mother to do what this lady did, this Tiffany Lucas lady, you literally going against nature. You done uprooted your whole biology. You're not even human no more. I'm gonna be honest with you. In my eyes, something is floating inside of you that just can't be tamed. Like how do those thoughts just how does that happen? How does that happen? How? It's sad. It's sad. I really thought that for stuff like that, I really do believe they should bring back that penalty. I'm a firm believer in that. Because an eye for an eye isn't really too bad, especially with things like this. She shouldn't be allowed to eat Doritos and honey buns and shit after what she did. But hey, it is what it is, man. They letting stuff like that fly in today's day and age. Like, yeah. I don't even want to go down there. That's a dark rap. That's a dark hole for. Uh, Shout out the justice system though. They did what they were supposed to do. Hey, if anybody ever make it this far, I'm trying not to cuss no more. I really mess with y'all for real. Like, you cool peoples. No cap.